proudly present to you one of the most influential American news anchors a human brain has ever been washed by, Rudi Bakhtiar! The prime-time voice of CNN headline news tonight, the female emancipation fighter who was fired from Fox News after complaining about sexual harassment. And furthermore, Rudi Bakhtiar is a producer for the Reuters news agency in Washington, so she really must belong to the good side. But anyway, this influential international news correspondent was involved in tons of bullshit stories. Yes, and today's video deals with one of them, with the one I already shortly mentioned, the bullshit story that in 2007 Rudi Bakhtiar was fired from Fox News because she complained about getting sexually harassed by another Fox News anchor, namely by her colleague Brian Wilson. So let's get right into it. Here you see the culprit and the victim, the harasser Brian Wilson and the harassed Rudi Bakhtiar. But I don't want to go into much detail about what information the mainstream media is spitting or was spitting out about the scandal. I'll reveal the really important details to you myself later, okay? We'll start very soon with that. Whether the mainstream media says that Brian Wilson grabbed Rudi Bakhtiar's ass, or whether it says that he took an upskirt photo of her, it doesn't matter at all to me. But okay, if you really want a bit more media lies about this, you can read the following article shown here. In 2007, Rudi Bakhtiar was fired by then Fox CEO Roger Ailes because she complained about sexual harassment that Brian Wilson had inflicted on her. And Roger Ailes is, of course, just as macho as Brian Wilson and forbade her from discussing the incident. And as I said, I don't give a damn about all these details that the mainstream media is reporting, because the most important and absolutely most shocking details in this case has simply been completely ignored by the media. And now I present to you this most important but hushed up piece of information, which is what makes this whole scandal so tragic. I implore you to get your tissues ready, okay? Get your tissues ready, because we are now going into a very, very deep rabbit hole of sexual abuse. Pedophilic familial abuse, in which a father rapes his own daughter. Yes, folks, I tell you so. I'm near to tears. That is exactly what is going on in this case of Rudi Bakhtiar and Brian Wilson. Because in reality, Brian Wilson is Rudi Bakhtiar's father. And if the father harassed his own daughter, then it probably wasn't just a slap on the bottom, but a real rape. Believe me, this is going to be a bullshit story at least as dark as the bullshit stories that are currently being spread in the mainstream media about Sean Diddy Combs. So please don't think I'm crazy for saying that Brian Wilson is Rudi Bakhtiar's father. No, I am not. I will prove that to you. And even if you can't find this information in the mainstream media, I can prove it, and I will. I'll get to that in about a minute, okay? To be more precise, the actual culprit is not Brian Wilson, but a Swedish royal family tyrant disguising as Brian Wilson. And he even seems to be using physical force to force his daughter, Princess Madeleine of Sweden, to disguise as well, because this Rudi Bakhtiar, I'm really afraid that I have to put it this way, she also seems to be wearing a disguise. Yes, and I think that Father Carl Gustav is really using domestic violence to organize this custom ball where these two masked faces came out. He could probably have foreseen that all the sexual abuse he's committed on his daughter might be spread through the media at some point, and maybe the disguises were supposed to cover up the embarrassment that this really is a case of pedophilic family abuse. And so in 2007, people were just talking about the female Fox News anchor who was sexually harassed by a colleague and who was fired after she complained about it. Okay, but they were not talking about the Swedish king raping his own daughter. To really get to the point, I don't want to know how many times King Carl Gustaf of Sweden beat up and raped his own daughter, Princess Madeleine, in Drottningholm Palace. Drottningholm Palace, for those who don't know, this is the residence of King Carl Gustaf and his wife, Queen Sylvia. So their daughter Madeleine also grew up there, of course, and as I said, Madeleine is also forced by her father, King Carl Gustaf, to disguise herself as a fake identity, Rudi Bakhtiar. 1 minute ago, you've already seen some short image comparisons which briefly showed Rudi Bakhtiar is played by Princess Madeleine of Sweden, and Brian Wilson is played by King Carl Gustaf of Sweden. And I cannot mention it often enough because it makes this case of sexual harassment so tragic. Carl Gustaf is Madeleine's father. Okay, so let's start to examine the identity between Rudi Bakhtiar and Princess Madeleine of Sweden in more detail. So, this is a match. Look at the exact same mouth, the same mouth wrinkles, the cheeks, compare the forms of the eyebrows. It's undeniable. And here, same shape of the entire face. Also, this is a match. And this is a very nice one which lets you see the same facial expressions on both sides. Above all, that extremely wide frog mouth when grimming is very clear here. And you know me, I always prove everything with family relations. Actually, the proof criterion of family relations is already sufficiently met by the fact that Rudi's harasser is played by Madeleine's father, and but we'll get to that just in a moment. Before that, I want to give you another family relation proof first, as with all my discoveries, I consulted the website whosdatedwho.com to find out with whom the character to expose was a couple, and I found out Rudi Bakhtiar was a couple with sports anchor Steve Overmyer in 2003. Here is further evidence of this. And now, of course, almost everyone can guess what's coming next. I'm already showing a photo of Princess Madeleine and her husband here. For everyone who didn't know, she is married to Christopher O'Neill, and now let's just see how well this Steve Overmyer, the sports journalist and ex-boyfriend of Rudi Bakhtiar, can be matched with Christopher O'Neill. Well, that is a match. And that is also a match. So, what is still left now is to deepen the match between Carl Gustaf of Sweden and Brian Wilson. I've already shown you this image comparison between the two, and some of Carl Gustaf's typical characteristics match here very well. For example, the typically short chin and also his narrow, elongated mouth, which runs like a straight line. Here again, just pay attention to the mouth, which is drawn like a line, the mouth walls and the nose. And also here, this is a clean ear comparison between the two. And here's a slightly different profile comparison. Here we are again at the point where I have clearly fulfilled my burden of proof, and the golden question now is, why did I make this proof at this point in time? Quite simple. Because these bullshit stories about Sean Diddy Combs are currently doing the rounds. All these rumors about sex parties, where some alternative thinkers are already asking about the attendee list in the same way they did ask about the Epstein passenger list. Honestly, folks, to ask questions like that, you really have to deny all the evidence that I've been presenting in all my videos and on Facebook for years now. The question of who attended Diddy's alleged sex parties can only be asked by someone who is in no way convinced of the actor-based reality. Or in other words, it can only be asked by someone who is in no way convinced that all of these alleged party participants are played by European royalty. Someone who is as strongly convinced of the blue-blooded actor-based reality as I am would at any time personally forbid himself from asking such a question because of his own knowledge. A nobleman who wears a mask or who is shapeshifted would never ever make a woman submissive for sex orgies by filling her with drugs or apply baby oil on her body. To everyone who denies these statements from me, I have to ask the question, how can you consider a fictional character who doesn't actually exist on his own? How can you consider such a character to be a rapist or a child trafficker? With All Stars, we are dealing with mere invented characters played by actors. And if you take what they play for us as some kind of truth. You have not understood that it's just an act. Look at Prince Albert of Monaco as Harvey Weinstein here. Can you really believe all these scandal stories claiming that Harvey Weinstein, as a film director, raped female actors on the film set? Can you really believe that? I can't believe that, because that would mean that a disguised male noble raped a disguised female noble. And I don't believe that a noble rapes another noble, okay? I know for a fact that all the sex scandals connected to this Sean Diddy Combs were staged in exactly the same way as the sexual harassment scandal between Rudi Bakhtiar and Brian Wilson. That means staged in line with the family relations of the nobles, as you have seen. This knowledge is simply based on the evidence that all stars, politicians and influential business bosses worldwide are played by European aristocrats. I simply know that after I've been researching the actor-based reality for 6 years now, one of the reasons why I have now exposed this abuse story between Rudi Bakhtiar and Brian Wilson is simply that none of you should be able to say, but faking sexual abuse using your own family members, that's sick. They don't do that, no. None of you should be able to apply such an argumentation to deny that the Diddy stories about sex orgies, baby oil and child trafficking are faked bullshit stories written by royals. Of course, it is sick to stage such things with your own close relatives, but that's exactly what European nobles actually do, because they are absolutely the sickest things walking around in this world. I don't want to deny that things like child trafficking and sex parties with terrible drug excesses and rapes really exist. I just want to say, when it comes to famous stars, you have to take it for granted that they are just faking such things, okay? They even do this very deliberately, because the stars are played by aristocrats. The aristocrats control the media, and the aristocrats have a very strong interest in spreading such stories about their fake identities. And I've really been wondering, especially in the last few days, why the truthers actually believe in something that is being pushed so heavily by the mainstream media. So the mainstream media just has to write something that fits into the QAnon narrative, and by that the mainstream media suddenly writes the truth. As always, I'm convinced that the nobles will jump for joy when more truthers jump on this QAnon shit. Because this is a psyop these noblemen wrote for us with their own hands. Okay? So, this Sean Diddy Combs is also nothing more than the fake identity of a nobleman. I'm putting my hand in the fire for that, despite I haven't exposed the noble behind this Sean Diddy Combs yet, but Diddy has now become my new personal main target. Exposing him would of course be the best way to completely refute all of these dark bullshit stories. I'll hunt him down and see through his artificially dark pigmentation someday. Yes. And now that I have said and shown everything I wanted to say and show about all these sex and drug swamp stories. I say goodbye to you for today. See you later.